Good morning or good evening, good afternoon, actually, depending on where in the world you are watching this from. I was just inspired to jump on. I've been in JoyRide, my members group, just now for Stable Hours, which is our weekly Q&A, and I was like, I'm going to jump on and do another one. So here I am. I'm actually just going to take a moment to check that I'm in the right place, which is always one of my Facebook Live fears, that I'm either just on my own page or in some random group that I've accidentally pressed the buttons of. But no, I'm here. We are all systems go. It's a glorious day here. We have been having the most amazing weather so far. I think that we hit record temperatures for July, which was like the highest daily temperature that we've had since 1940 or something crazy. So I'm totally not complaining. Normally at this time of year where I am, I'm like schlepping around in the mud and whinging every time I have to go out and feed the horses. So dry ground is like winning at life as far as I'm concerned for the middle of winter. What have all you guys been up to? Where are you at the moment? I know there's a variety of different things going on right now with all different people. I've got my peeps on this side of the world that are negotiating the darkness and winter and figuring out how that fits into the grand scheme of things with getting out there and working their horses. And after this, I'm actually going to duck out and do something with Dee in the round pen, I think. And then those of you in the northern hemisphere that are basking in the middle of summer and the competitive amongst you, have lots of things going on, many things happening. So I'd love to hear where you're at. Anyway, so my theme for today, it actually, and I recorded a podcast about this yesterday, is not just to talk about comeback. Hello, lovely. Not just to talk about the new pathway that I have for JoyRide, which is called Comeback. And that's all about returning from injury and trauma. I'm going to get into that in a little bit more detail shortly. But it was really motivated by some of the common narratives or the common themes that I see floating around social media and other places as well. Because when I was at the supermarket the other day, I picked up a magazine that had an article in it on returning from injury or returning from being, having some kind of accident. And I'm always super keen to see what other people have to say and to learn things from other people. Absolutely. But I was really disappointed in the article, and I'm disappointed a lot when I read these things. And it's because they perpetuate fairly common themes, which we hear a lot about in the psychology world, especially, around sports psychology and injury. And some of those themes are think positive and, like manage your attitude and, ease back slowly is another one. What's something else? I wrote them down on one of the posts I did earlier. Know your limits. Yeah, that's another one that kind of comes up time and time again. And I think, there's nothing inherently wrong with those, I guess, although I do have a problem with the think positive one. The others I agree with to an extent. It's not that they're problems per se, it's just that they're incomplete. They are insufficient recommendations when it comes to negotiating trauma or injury because let me get into that. Good morning, Noreen. Island prevails. Good morning, Sue Ellen. So let's start with think positive. My problem with think positive is that thinking positive is sometimes not the most useful thing for us. I know, ironic for me to say that, hey, but I've really stopped using the word positive because it's become a bit of a catchphrase that's gone along with the whole movement towards affirmations. But really, what we want to do or what we want to make sure of is that within any experience, we're really honouring the entirety of that experience. And when you're told to think positive, it can add a layer on top of a feeling that is anything but positive. And what that does is just cause further suppression or repression of a situation, a feeling state, which is which is necessary to be able to honor and negotiate in order to move forward in a way that's fully in alignment. So thinking positive, if that is out of alignment with how it is that you feel, then really all it's going to do is provide you with a facade that is perhaps what you feel like you should be thinking, or that you should be projecting, or that will help other people around you feel more comfortable. But actually, it's not how you feel. And when you don't feel positive, but you're trying to feel positive, it can create a huge shame cycle or an unworthiness cycle that does nothing to get you to a better feeling place, and does nothing to help you negotiate what it is that actually is happening, and the messages behind the feelings and emotions that you actually are feeling that, like I said, are necessary in order for you to be able to move forward in a really complete way. The other thing that commonly comes up when we are talking about trauma or talking about injury is that it is commonly discussed from the place of thoughts, from the psychological. And absolutely, that's a part of it. Absolutely. There's no denying that at all. However, it is an incomplete part, because anything that has caused us to have some sort of form of traumatic resonance in our nervous system is also a somatic or a physical experience. And let's have a little bit of a think about how that might apply. If you are out in the arena, for instance, or you're just out there with your horse, and you've had something in the past that's happened to you, or that has caused you to feel a certain way about riding or doing whatever it is that you need to do, you can, on a logical level, know, or on an intellectual level, understand that you're safe. Maybe you've ticked all the boxes. Maybe the horse that you are about to ride or work with is not the same horse that you had a problem with or had an accident with. And so cognitively and logically, you can understand that there's really no cause for concern. You might have a whole bunch of people around you that are actually reiterating that dialogue, get on, there's nothing to be afraid of, you need to just get on and do it. It's all in your head, all of that sort of thing. And the fact of the matter is, it isn't all in your head, because we now have this war that's going on between what we think is happening and what we know we should be feeling, but that isn't how we feel. And the reason for that is that in our neurology, or in our bodies, we've stored that experience as an emotional memory, as a trauma. And so finding or creating a corrective and integrated emotional experience moving forward involves not only addressing those thought pathways, but addressing how it is we feel, understanding the felt sense, understanding that on a neurological level, what we need to do is resource ourselves with the ability to simultaneously instigate feelings of comfort and resilience and safety and nurturing, if you like, and marry those with some of the uncomfortable feelings that we are experiencing, so that we can invite our nervous system to complete the cycle that it initially wasn't able to do. So anytime that we are in a state of trauma, or anytime we are really storing that in our body, that has come about because our system has been overwhelmed in some way. It has been too fast, too much, or too soon. All those three things have happened, and we haven't been able to mount a response to the stimulus that we've been presented with that would allow us to see that through to a safe or complete resolution. So if we think about it in terms of the nervous system, what happens in a normal situation, sorry, my brain's going at 1,000,000 miles an hour trying to get everything out that I want to tell you. I need to slow down. What happens is that we are presented with a stimulus. And what I mean by a stimulus is we are presented with something which causes our nervous system to go into sympathetic activation. So we have that influx of adrenaline in our body. Maybe we feel threatened in some way, or maybe something is happening with our horse that causes us to feel alarmed. And when we are in a normal mode of operations, in a healthy mode of operations, we recognize the stimulus, we rally in response to that. So we rise to the occasion, the situation is dealt with, and then we come back down. and we reset, we reintegrate, and we restabilize back at that neutral place, which is what we would refer to as a complete arousal cycle. Now, in the case of trauma, that cycle is incomplete. And what we're left with is this huge influx of energy that happens as a result of that sympathetic activation. So we have a stimulus that has caused us to feel concerned in some way. We've gone into that sympathetic place where all of those hormones and adrenal responses have been activated and released into our system, but we haven't been able to complete that cycle by mounting a response that was valid and coming back down to a place where we're able to reintegrate our experience. Now, what that leaves us with is a nervous system that is in a state of hyper-alertness and hypervigilance. And when we aren't able to correct that neurologically or physically, we then seek out the ways and means to complete that arousal cycle in perhaps unhealthy ways. So this is where we can find ourselves involved in cycles of drama or cycles of experience with our horses that are reflective or mirror what it was that's happened in the past, because we are unconsciously seeking to press reset. But we generally, as a rule, I know I certainly didn't before I got into this stuff in a lot greater detail. I didn't have those skills either. So these are things that we need to learn. We need to be able to invite our nervous system, if you like, into that completion, to complete that cycle. And there are ways of doing that which don't require us to actually relive the experience or recreate the trauma, but actually be able to deal with uncomfortable or difficult emotion and sensation when it arises, and have the tools both psychologically and somatically to be able to adequately and safely deal with that. So that's my response to that. That's where think positive, take it slowly, all of those things become quite just not enough. Not enough. And for any of us that have had an injury or had some kind of event which we would classify as traumatic, being told to think positive or to harden up and do it is just not only non-empathetic and not sensitive to the situation, but it's not useful. It's not useful because it is so much more than that. And we have an incredibly wise body. We have a body that is able to store memories and sensations for us when we can't. And this is why it's so important to deal with injury and trauma in a really integrated way, not in a way that is talking about false rhetoric or getting you to chant affirmations, because it will only be dealing with a part of the situation and actually could be quite harmful. If you're trying to think positive but you don't have the skills to actually press reset on a different level, then all you're going to do is feel kind of crap, frankly, about it, because you think, well, I should be feeling positive, but I don't. I should be able to do this, but I can't. What's wrong with me? And then the injury in and of itself creates this before and after story where you're desperate to get back to how it was you were before, because you see yourself as ultimately deficient or defunct now. And that is absolutely not the case. Trauma and injury and anything which has had some kind of defining feature in your life, it's possible to use that as a form of transformation rather than degradation and denigration of the self. You think about the skills that are available to you as a result of having gone through something. You think about the level of empathy, the level of understanding for both you and your horse that you're able to develop if you really allow yourself to embrace that experience as something that is inherently going to create change, but you're going to use it as a transformational piece rather than something which you'll find disabling or disempowering. The key really is to create an empowering context around the situation. And I get that can be tough, and I get that can be time dependent, because when you're in the midst of it, you can feel anything but transformed by it. But this is very much a process rather of working things out step by step and really honoring the experience, because you deserve that and your horse deserves that. And I feel like some of the rhetoric that gets around doesn't really honour that, basically. So there's me on my soapbox today, getting out there and doing it. What was the other thing that I wanted to say? What's really interesting, if you think about, let me give you an example of why this would happen, like why in the case of injury or trauma we would have such disparity or such fragmented experience that we're unable to integrate. The first thing I want to say at this point is that trauma is different to stress. So in general conversation that we have day to day, you might hear someone say, oh, it's really traumatic, I was really traumatized by that. But what they mean is that they were stressed by that, like that caused stress. And the difference between a stressful situation and a traumatic situation is that a stressful situation resolves after the stressor is removed. A traumatic situation stays. So if you have had an experience in the past which you would classify as stressful, you're able to view that situation in your memory as a past experience. In the case of trauma, the feeling of the trauma and the somatic and neurological experiences in relation to the trauma relive and revisit you as if they were happening in the present moment. And that is why you can have that, all of the physical sensations arise, all of the psychological fears and anxieties arise as if that was happening right back when you first experienced it. And that's because neurologically and somatically, your body is still in that place. It's still within that emotional memory, and that's been stored very much in a physical way. So the reason that that happens, and I found this really interesting when I first found that out, is that your hippocampus is the part of your brain which essentially timestamps and codes memory. For instance, you're watching this Facebook Live and we're having a chat now. And tomorrow, if you were to think back, you would remember this as a memory. You would say on Tuesday or on Monday, depending on what part of the world you watch this in, I remember watching Jane on Facebook Live talking about injury and trauma, and you would be able to place that in the timeline of your mind as a past experience. So as you go through your day in normal circumstances, that ability is one that is created through the hippocampus. It puts a little mark on that and says, on Wednesday you watch this, or on Tuesday you watch that. And when you reflect back, you're able to integrate that as part of your experience. In the case of traumatic experience, and traumatic experience often goes together with injury, that the hippocampus goes offline. It essentially leaves the building. Your system is overwhelmed to the extent that that experience is no longer time-stamped and encoded. And what that means is we are left with fragmented experiences that are detached from meaning and understanding that we are unable to, on a neurological level, place in the past. So when you go to recall that, when something happens which triggers that response in you, you don't think, oh, I had that injury and I had that feeling and experience 3 months ago. It comes up as if it was happening in the present moment. And so what needs to happen is we need to reintegrate that part of our nervous system so we can complete the cycle and recognize that experience as separate to the moment that is happening now. Trauma robs us of that ability. It really causes us to feel like our present experience it causes us to feel like a past experience is a present experience. And we will keep triggering through that. We will keep reintegrating and we'll keep reliving that until that cycle has found some form of completion. I hope that makes sense. It's such a fascinating topic. And the irony, I guess, given the subject matter, you would think, oh, this is kind of heavy and it's a lot to get into. It's such a beautiful process. It is such a beautiful process of resourcing yourself with gifts that allow you to feel nourished and comforted and uplifted. And they are skills which are useful not only in the case of injury and trauma, but in the case of any time we experience uncomfortable emotion that is habitual or patterned. So you might find that you are habitually anxious, or you might find you're habitually fearful, or there's some form of felt sense that perhaps you can't even identify. Some of us have like a thing where you're standing there on the mounting block, or you catch your horse and it's like, what is this feeling that comes up? It's not anxiety, it's not fear, but it's definitely uncomfortable. And it's something that you're familiar with. We all have that sensation that might visit us on occasion, which is like an old friend. And we're like, I don't know what you are, but you always come up in relation to this. And that can be an indication of, or that's sort of the emotional state that I'm talking about. That's your ability to really start to reintegrate the different parts of yourself and work with these same tools so that you're able to oscillate between uncomfortable feeling and repattern that in association with something that provides that sustenance and comfort for you. That was my mission, and it's all live and up now as part of my online program. So I really invite you, if you are in a situation right now where you're like, I just don't know how to get through this, to come and join me for Comeback, because it's, like I say, it's a really beautiful process to go through. I really think that as the sensory creatures that we are, and given the fact that our horses have such a high level of sensory acuity, we really owe this to ourselves to be able to access these skills. There's 3 pathways that are set up as the prerequisite for this material, and you have access to all of those straight up when you join. All in, aware and calm. So calm will deal with the cognitive side of things that we've been talking about, the anticipation anxiety, anything that really comes up in relation to the thoughts that we have, the itty bitty shitty committee, absolutely. And then we go through this somatic process, which is the process of the comeback pathway, to really resource ourselves and set ourselves up for success. A huge part of it is doing the legwork. So it's not like you get in there and you like dive into the hard stuff and I launch you into the deep end. It's not about that at all. It's like, how can we go back to this place? How can we go back to this place that we know is hard, that brings up stuff for us, which is really difficult to deal with? Like, how do we get back to that place and have the ability to point our internal compass towards the things that can help us, rather than the things which detract from our ability to move forward? That's generally what happens in the case of extreme discomfort or injury. You know, you get out there, and if you are triggered on a neurological or emotional or somatic level to feel a certain way, then everything that you muster points towards the stuff which you're concerned about. It doesn't point you towards the things that can allow you to feel something more beneficial or more constructive for that situation. So we want to get to a place where we are fully resourced to be able to do that, to be able to say, okay, this is what we need to draw on, this is where we need to gather our resources and skills from, and these are the things that we know we can move between, because we are in control of this process and we have what we need to be able to integrate this feeling and experience right now. So important. I'm so passionate about it, as you might be able to tell. I haven't been watching the comments because I get off track easily. I've got like shiny object syndrome when it comes to the comments, but I will go back and answer each and any one of them. And if you have, each and every rather, if you have any questions, please let me know, because I'm more than happy to answer them. And I'll let you know if I think that it's not going to be suitable for you. Like, it's definitely, I'm really only interested in successful conclusions for everyone concerned. So if you want to dive in, please come and join me. There's so much there aside from that, but that's our focus for today, and that's the soapbox for this morning. All right, lovely ones, you have a fabulous day, and I will see you on the flip side. Bye.